In 1974, something happened on the Blazing Saddles set that no one talks about. The actor cast as the Waco Kid disappeared after just one day of filming. What he did 4 years later would haunt Hollywood forever. But the secrets run deeper than that. John Wayne, the king of westerns, read the script and responded with just 3 words that changed everything. The original title of the film had a powerful connection to Malcolm X, something Warner Brothers buried. And there's even a hidden message in the name of the governor that only French historians understand. These aren't just movie trivia, they're buried truths the industry didn't want you to know. For 50 years, the wild story of Blazing Saddles has been reduced to laughs and fart jokes. But behind the scenes was chaos, danger, genius, and history. The film started with a bold idea. Its original title was Tex X, a direct nod to Malcolm X. Andrew Bergman, then in his 20s, wrote a script about a black sheriff arriving in an all-white town. Naming the sheriff after Malcolm X wasn't just edgy, it was revolutionary. It challenged everything Hollywood westerns had traditionally stood for. The image of a black man in charge of the Old West was a cultural grenade. Even more shocking was the fact that a major studio was considering making it. This was the early 1970s. Mainstream films didn't tackle race in this way, and certainly not through satire. Eventually the name Tex X was dropped, but the core fire remained. The idea still burned bright when Blazing Saddles finally came to life. Before Mel Brooks entered the picture, the film nearly went in a completely different direction. Alan Arkin was set to direct, and James Earl Jones, long before becoming Darth Vader, was cast as the sheriff. Jones had the gravitas, but not a background in comedy. Still, he was a powerful choice. But it fell apart. The script was too sharp, too provocative. Creative clashes erupted. Executives got cold feet. The entire project was shelved, feared too dangerous for a public audience. It was only resurrected when Mel Brooks signed on. He didn't soften it, he amplified it. Ironically, Brooks didn't take the job out of confidence. He was at rock bottom. After The Producers, he had an Oscar but no major success. His next film, The 12 Chairs, bombed. He was broke, struggling to support his wife Anne Bancroft and their baby. He took the job not out of vision but desperation. Later he admitted that Blazing Saddles saved him. It gave him enough money to finally buy a house and live without fear again. The writing process was total chaos. Brooks brought in for additional writers Andrew Bergman, Richard Pryor, Norman Steinberg, and Alan Yuger. The writer's room was like a saloon, brawled loud, unruly, and relentless. Everyone was fighting to get their jokes through. Sessions ran all night. The first draft, a staggering 412 pages, enough for nearly 8 hours of film. They trimmed it to 275, still massive, but loaded with razor-sharp satire. It wasn't writing, it was war. Pryor brought his biting edge to the table, especially shaping the sheriff's character. No one remembers who wrote what. Even the infamous campfire fart scene came from this whirlwind. Brooks encouraged rule-breaking from day one. He posted a sign in the room, "Please do not write a polite script." That statement shaped everything. There were no sacred cows. Pryor wrote Jewish jokes. The Jewish writers wrote black jokes. They weren't trying to be safe. They were trying to be honest, fearless, and hilarious. The result was unlike anything Hollywood had ever seen. They didn't just parody westerns, they burned them to the ground and danced in the ashes. Pryor was meant to play the lead sheriff Bart. Brooks fought for him, but Warner Brothers said no. Pryor had just served jail time and his drug problems made him uninsurable. Brooks was furious, ready to quit, but Pryor calmly told him to keep going. "We'll find the right guy," he said. Pryor didn't leave, he stayed on the writing team and gave the film its fire. In the end, Cleveland Little landed the role, and Brooks admitted they got lucky. But it's hard not to wonder what Pryor would have done in the role, especially since just 2 years later, he and Gene Wilder would become one of comedy's most iconic duos. Then came one of the biggest what-ifs in Hollywood casting history. Mel Brooks wanted John Wayne to play the Waco Kid. Yes, that John Wayne, the serious flag-waving icon of westerns. Brooks handed him the script. Wayne read it, laughed all night, and said he loved it, but he turned it down. "It's too dirty for my image," he told Brooks, "but I'll be first in line to see it." Just imagine it, the straightest cowboy in history, mocking the very genre that made him famous. It didn't happen, but it came very close. After Wayne passed, Brooks became obsessed with casting Dan Dailey. Dailey was known for musicals, not westerns, but he could ride a horse better than most real cowboys. Brooks tracked him down in Hawaii. Dailey loved the script but had to decline. His eyesight was failing. He said he was nearly blind and couldn't ride safely anymore. It crushed Brooks. He kept searching. Then came the disaster. He cast Gig Young, an Oscar winner with the right look, but Young had a severe drinking problem. On his first day of filming, he shook uncontrollably. Brooks thought it was acting until green bile poured from his mouth. He was rushed to the hospital. Brooks later said, "If you want an alcoholic, don't cast an alcoholic." What followed was a miracle. Brooks scrambled and called Gene Wilder. He said he'd drop everything and fly out. Wilder arrived, put on the hat, and the Waco Kid was born. The rest is comedy history. But behind the jokes and the satire was a film that barely survived its own birth. Blazing Saddles wasn't just a movie, it was a rebellion against racism, against studio fear, and against every safe convention Hollywood held dear. 50 years later, it's still controversial, still hilarious, and still hiding secrets most people never knew. Ask ChatGPT. Cleveland Little was cast as Sheriff Bart, and Brooks later said it was pure luck. But what really changed the film was the Waco Kid. Brooks initially offered the role to John Wayne. The Duke read the script, laughed, and told Brooks, "I can't do it, it's too dirty for my image. But I'll be the first in line to see it." Then Brooks chased Don Daly, a musical star who could ride like a pro. Daly loved the script but turned it down. His failing eyesight meant he couldn't safely ride a horse anymore. Finally, Brooks cast Oscar winner Gig Young. Young had the right look, but a serious alcohol problem. On the first day of filming, he collapsed in a jail cell scene, vomiting green bile. Brooks realized too late, if you want an alcoholic, don't cast an alcoholic. Young never returned and later sued Warner Brothers. That's when Gene Wilder stepped in. Brooks hadn't considered him for the role. He thought Wilder looked too young and clean. He'd previously offered him the villain role, which Wilder declined. Now desperate, Brooks called him in tears. Wilder flew to LA, tried on the Waco Kid's costume, and it fit like magic. He was on set by Monday. His calm presence and offbeat timing transformed the role, and his chemistry with Cleveland Little gave the film its heart. When Brooks first screened Blazing Saddles for Warner Brothers executives, it was a disaster. Nobody laughed. The room was silent, offended, and visibly uncomfortable. Fart jokes, a horse-punching scene, and liberal use of the N-word made the suits furious. One executive, Leo Greenfield, said they should bury the movie and take the loss. Others agreed. They handed Brooks a long list of cuts: remove the slurs, delete the campfire scene, tone everything down. Brooks took the list, walked out, and crumpled it up. He refused to change anything. Instead, he arranged a second screening not for executives, but for the secretaries, janitors, and mailroom workers. This time the room erupted. People were howling with laughter, gasping for air, even falling out of their chairs. One of the co-writers, Norman Steinberg, remembered it vividly. People were literally rolling on the floor. Brooks turned to him and said, "This is our film." That audience saved Blazing Saddles. The executives couldn't ignore the raw laughter, but even then, Warner Brothers was nervous. They gave it a quiet release in just 3 cities, New York, LA, and Chicago. No ads, no reviews, no buzz, just a cold opening to test the waters. It exploded. Packed theaters, standing ovations, and word of mouth that spread like wildfire. What began as a risky comedy turned into a phenomenon. Critics were split. Some called it genius, others vulgar, but audiences didn't care. They kept coming back. By spring 1974, it was playing in small towns and suburbs where the studio had expected silence. Instead, they got sellouts. People didn't just watch the movie, they quoted it, debated it, and built a cult around it on a $2.6 million budget. Blazing Saddles made $119.6 million in North America, making it the top-grossing film of 1974. Over 63 million people saw it in theaters. Than any Lord of the Rings film. Adjusted for inflation, it earned nearly $600 million. It didn't just succeed, it rewrote the rules of comedy. Even the smallest details were layered with meaning. Take the governor's name, William J. Lepetamine. It sounds like nonsense, but it's a tribute to Joseph Poutel, a French performer known as Lepetamine, the fart maniac, who entertained sold-out crowds by performing controlled flatulence. Nurses were stationed at his shows because people laughed so hard they fainted. He once allegedly made someone die laughing. Brooks honored him as a hidden godfather of comedy. Brooks also played a Native American chief who spoke fluent Yiddish, a nod to how Jewish actors were once cast in native roles. The chief lets a wagon of black settlers pass and cracks a joke in Yiddish. "They darker than us." It was offensive, absurd, and intentionally layered with cultural and cinematic history. Brooks also lent his voice to background singers, random hecklers, and hidden characters, saturating the film with his fingerprints. And then there were the anachronisms, a 1930s jazz orchestra appearing in 1874, TV sports references in the Old West. The movie broke space and time on purpose. One scene even crashes into another movie set, then into a musical, then into a cafeteria. It's not a mistake, it's Brooks destroying genre conventions. The Count Basie moment, where a